Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on The Weekend Show. My name is Andy Madaki.
And I'm Eddie Young Frank.
Hello, Didi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, actually.
Before this segment started, I prompted you to tell me something, so please start.
Happy International Day of the Boy
I am a
Child.
boy
We
child.
celebrated on Thursday, actually.
Yes.
Did you do anything special?
No, I didn't. I actually forgot. It was later in the night. I saw a
Okay.
post about it, and I was like, oh, this actually does exist, and I forgot. But thank you very much, even though we had to beg for it, and Happy Day of the Boys Child belated to the men over here. On the lifestyle segment, we will be speaking about something which is very passionate to me, education. And the reason why I say this is something I'm very passionate about is the fact that failure isn't really accepted in Africa and Nigeria. Your success in most cases, or you being celebrated, starts from how well you perform in school. And so I remember after every term in primary school, all aunties and uncles ask you, what position did you come? What were your grades? And that was your life till you're about 16. And then you have to write the matriculation examination organized by the Joint Admission Matriculations Board. Some people get high scores and get into universities. Some people, even with the high scores, can't get into universities. And so what happens is they have to write the same exam the next year. What happens when they write the same exam the next year, and at about 50% of the people who wrote that exam failed? And then you hear people complaining about it, and it sounded like, oh, these young people just aren't serious. And then we realized that over 150 centers has technical glitches. Now, the reason why this is very upsetting to me is I started by saying in Africa, we care in Nigeria about academic success, which means most kids who fail exams are flogged by their parents.
Yeah.
I remember growing up when at the end of the term, some kids can't go home because they have bad grades. No one is saying that they're being taught right. Do they have a problem? Are they in the wrong class? Are they in the wrong course? I mean, I had to do social sciences as opposed to arts when I was entering SS1 because arts was seen as something for girls until I changed on my own. And then people are taking and making life decisions, which is now in the hands of boards like Jamb. And if you check on BBC Africa, it's reported that a young girl of 19 committed suicide because she scored 146. Actions have consequences, and people say if you play silly games, you get silly rewards. It goes beyond crying on TV. Yes, we understand the empathy, but what is being done? This is the same country where we've heard that rat has eaten money, snake has eaten money, monkeys have entered into offices. How long will we just continue to see our country as a comedy show? Well, we're talking about the recent scandal with the Joint Admissions Matriculations Board recently concluded exams and results which have been released. And joining us we have...
I have Jeremiah Oseni, who is the founder and executive director, Begotten Educational Foundation. We also have joining us Sam Leke Abiwanu, who is the vice principal, Olumawo School, Abuja. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning to yourself. Thank you for having me here.
And welcome.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning,
you for having
sir.
me.
Thank you. So I'll start with you, especially because you are a vice principal. I saw you nodding when I was talking about how parents react to students not doing well in school. This is something you understand. For some of us Nigerian students, failing assignments and failing some exercises, we got flogged in school, which means there's a high premium on doing well. And then they do all their best. The teachers have also taught to the best of their knowledge. The students write exams, and then they're being failed not because they didn't do well, but because there's a glitch in the system. What's your take on this recent scandal with the Joint Admissions Matriculations Board?
Okay, thank you very much. The recent scandal is one that touches my heart so deeply because first, as an educator, examinations for a Nigerian child is very important. I mean, it's more or less like a rite of passage for every Nigerian child to write Jamb and then to proceed to higher institution of learning. So having to see that this happened is really, really touching. So going back to what you said concerning the day-to-day result that is chunked out in schools and how Nigerian families react to that. We see that growing up, it's a culture that, like you initially mentioned, it's more or less like competition. you have to do well, you have to do better. For me, as a person, the mental health of the candidates, the youth, the young people, has been very, very touching to me, because once this happens, you wait again until another year before you get a chance, which means a lot to the young person. And that, is really touching to me, very touching.
I'd like to hear your thoughts as well.
Okay, first and foremost to start, right, I wouldn't like to talk about the scandal for this year. Jamb has always had scandals, starting from the year 2000 and all that. Jamb has always had, issues. But recently we have seen a progressive downward trend, in the performance of Jamb, right? And this one we're talking about now, is just something that I would say was an offshoot of what happened last year. When it happened last year, the result last year was terrible. But what happened? Jamb came out, the leadership of Jamb came out, and lambasted the very people that organization was set up to protect or to promote or to help them assist their processing from secondary school to university. Shut up, children, the vulnerable population of the community, which is the youth and, of course, students, and also, came up with press releases that even parents are aiding, you can remember, are aiding, children in examination malpractice. This they did to silence the loud cry of the mass failure that happened last year. They blamed it on the children. They blamed it on CBT centers. A lot of CBT centers were shut down across the country. And to make matters even worse, they started blaming parents that they are aiding their children, on examination malpractice. All until this year it happened, and the real thing happened in a larger scale, which was the technical glitches. I came up last year and I made this thing known. I said it is high time for Jamb to go back to its original decree. Jamb is a product of a decree, in 1978. Jamb wasn't a product of the federal government coming to say, oh, let's put something together. It was a committee of certain vice chancellors in Nigerian universities that wrote a recommendation to the then military government to say, okay, we need a system to process fairness and, of course, to coordinate the entrance of Nigerian students from secondary school into universities. That was how, it came up, all about. Where am I trying to go with this conversation? Jamb was not originally created to focus on exams. If you look at the decree, which is now an act, because after we came into democracy in 2004, those decrees like NYSC 2 that came, those things that came during the military era were then, recorded, into an act. Now, if you look at the act, let's use that from 2004. Jamb has 5 major mandates. Exam is just one of the mandates. The major mandate of Jamb is to facilitate with fairness the coordination of students from secondary school into university, and they have failed woefully in that. Over the years, we have now seen Jamb concentrate only squarely on the exam aspect of it. You see people come in and they also praise themselves on the CBT aspect of it and all of that. And I'm like, why? Why is that so? That is not your primary responsibility. That's not your primary concern. Let me add a caveat here, actually. As an educator, he will also understand with me. There are different types of exams. Okay, there are achievement exams and there are ranking exams, right? Jamb examination are ranking, not achievement. I'm just saying this to also help the mental health of parents and children out there, Nigerian students out there. So this Jamb exam is not actually meant to say, okay, you are a dullard or you are a genius. It's just to rank people into different categories to enter different, tertiary institutions. I just also said to make that clear. But Jamb on its own have not performed up to expectations. They are supposed to facilitate the entrance of children from secondary school into universities. They are also, supposed to ensure that there's fairness in that process. And then that's why in the original context of Jamb, there is no word called exam. When the decree was passed in 1978, there was no exam in the world. It was university admission matriculation or thereabouts, right? It was later in 2007 when they joined in 1978. The main decree for Jamb came. Jamb was instituted. The processes was through the UME and then also the MPCE. So the main one, which is now a wahala today, was the one that facilitated people the ranking process into university. Then in 1989, another process came up, which was now the MPCE, which is monotechnic, polytechnics, and College of Education exams. But that we did till 2007, when everything was now jammed together, compounding the problem for the organization of Jamb. Where you now have everybody going, both those going to polytechnics, both those going to university, both those going to colleges, taking the same subjects in Jamb. So now, even if you're going to go to a college of nursing, for instance, you have to be tested in the same biology testing as somebody who is going to study medicine in university. Where is the fairness there? Even if you're going to take English, for instance, to become a journalist like you, you're going to be tested in the same English as somebody who is going to do, let's say, urban regional planning, for instance, or engineering, for instance. Where is the fairness there?
Talking about fairness, and some people say if it's not broken, don't fix it. But if some things are broken, you might as well get rid of it. I've now been seeing comments about how maybe this should be scrapped and unnecessary because in Nigeria, regardless of the ranking system which Jamb provides, the Nigerian education system and tertiary educations, especially government run, starts with something called the first list, which is merit list. Then there's the second list, which is those who weren't at the top tier. And then there's a third list, which is usually called the VC's list, where politicians, the state governors, the ministers, and people in power send a list of their people that regardless of their scores, they make it to the third list. I'll call that the political list. And so while we talk about fairness with this process, if we're still going to have people enter through different means that they will, do you think Jamb is still needed? This exam, do you think is still necessary?
Okay, so let me answer that squarely. I wouldn't say Jamb is no longer needed. If we are scrapping, it's either we scrap one of two. Because Jamb, over the time, has now gotten a monster that is really compounding its problem.
Well, a rich monster making over 15 billion a year.
Exactly. And what I'm even talking about is not even Jamb itself. It's the post-UME, which was allowed or introduced by the then Minister of Education, Madam Obi Ezekwesili, in 2005, right? Now, post-UME had no basis where Jamb is. There is no reason for a nation to conduct post-UME after a child has already passed Jamb. Like I said, it's a ranking, examination. Immediately you're done with that, you're supposed to be placed, that is the main core of Jamb, to ensure that that child secures an admission, is placed into a school. So in that system, in that proper idea, of Jamb, we're not supposed to have post-UME again. So now, it is either we come back to the drawing table to say, are we scrapping Jamb to uphold post-UME? Or are we going to just scrap post-UME, which has no basis, no act or whatever? It's just institution. It's being controlled at institutional level. That's at the tertiary institutional level.
I'm guessing there's a fee they pay for that as well.
Exactly. There's a lot of bribery that happens there. Like you said, politicians will come and say, okay, push the kids and all of that, which is really, really wrong. Talking about that, are we not tired of the levels of layering in our education system? Where you have, it is only in Nigeria. Because we want to look at developed countries, yeah? We want to compare ourselves to America, Canada, Wales, Australia, UK, and all of that. It is only Nigeria in the list of these nations I just mentioned, where you see a child who wants to go to a tertiary institution, they will write WAEC. If your parents have money, you write NECO. You take Jamb. You take post-UME before you enter university. You don't do that in America. It is only SAT that you have to take in America. In the UK, you go in through the process of the UCAS. In Canada, if your secondary school exams is enough for you to go into a tertiary institution. But in Nigeria, there is WAEC, there is NECO, probably maybe you take JAM, GC, there's JAM, and there's post-UME. Why these too many layerings? Disturbing the mental faculty of our children. It is uncalled for, and it is needless. Let me give a very shocking illustration. Say, for instance, Lagbaja's son, let's say Andrew is his name. Andrew lives in Gariki, Abuja, or in Lugbe, right? And Andrew wants to go to, Andrew has written his WAEC, all A's or a little bit of A's and B's and C's, a good result, correct? And Andrew wants to go to a tertiary institution. Do you know that Andrew can take that, his WAEC result, with just a scratch card, Andy, and then apply to, say, Oxford, or a very rich school in America, and he will be granted admission. But if Andrew says, okay, I want to school in Nigeria, do you know what? He will have to write Jamb with the same WAEC that is recognized in America, that is recognized in Canada, that is recognized in the UK. But in his own house, he will have to write Jamb, he will have to write post-UME, and God be favorable to Andrew that there are no technical glitches. He may have to even do that whole process 2 years or 3 times all over again. Then what are we not talking about?
And even at that, still have to call the father's friend or uncle to help get admission. But
It's so unfortunate that in Nigeria we celebrate hardship.
Yeah.
Because according to what you've said now, it's so unnecessary having all those layers. But Sam, based on your, your daily interactions with students and your knowledge of Jamb, what do you think happened? Where did that shift come? Where we're still having this recent mass failures coming from Jamb?
Okay, so like he has said, I won't say recent, but you see the thing with social media is nothing can go unnoticed these days. I mean, the noise will be out there. Yeah, maybe we can say kudos to Professor Oluwede for coming out to publicly apologize. For some quarters, they've seen it as crocodile tears because it was also disappointing that people behind him were applauding while he was, crying. The other thing I want us to look at as well is this. These cracks have been there. They've been gradual. They've been coming in. But the issue of technology, are we really ready? Where are we with it? If we call it glitches, that means they are unexpected. The question I'm asking today is, were they avoidable? What did Jamb do to ensure that this didn't happen? There was one mock that was done, which was hectic. A child or a candidate in Abuja would have been sent to, say, a Jalingo to go take a mock test. That is not feasible. He reported, and it's popular, it's on the public space, that a child, a candidate lost her life to this. This is really, really unfortunate. Of course, our thoughts and prayers are with the family. But what we are saying is this. These hitches that we're talking about today, were they avoidable? What did Jamb do about it? Yes, apologies have been tendered. Does this bring back Timileyin that lost her life? The candidate that you have asked to come and retake the assessment, how ready are they mentally? How ready are they emotionally? In their mind, if they come out with another aggregate that is an improved version, how believable can that be to that candidate? And if it is lower, what is the essence? Then how prepared is this child? What set of questions are you going to ask these same children, these same candidates? How do you want them to, contain this? It is really, really an unfortunate situation, and it calls for a serious review. I will not hastily say Jamb should be scrapped, but I'm asking that the handlers of this body, this board, we need a total overhauling, a review. We are talking about human lives, Nigerians, future leaders. And then if this is what they get because they are making effort to better their own life, then it is really unfortunate.
While we wrap this up, sir, I would like you to speak to parents at home.
Okay.
The Now we talk about failing fast, failing smart. Failure is something which we don't teach people. And so I've seen people who have done so well through primary, secondary school, university, then they get into the real world. And because they've had success academically, they have no idea how to handle rejection or disappointment in the workspace or pressure. But some children who have gone through a lot of failures become even more resilient. If you find out about innovation and creations, it's people who have failed and retooled it. And so an African parent's default is to scold, insult, hit a child for failing. How do you advise parents to handle that?
I mean, it's completely archaic for an African parent, for any parent for that matter, but we're talking about Nigerian parents now, to use the approach of hitting, shouting, because they are not performing, maybe to their own expectation. Everybody's got different abilities in different things that they engage in. Now, we need to continue with what I call continuous education of our parents. They need to understand who Sam is and what my ability is. If you judge a fish, as it has been said, by the ability to fly, then that fish is dumb. But then you need to understand who your child is and encourage them positively. You need to know what ability your child has got, what to say to them, and how to motivate them. Gone are the days of reverse psychology, where I need to shout at you and compare you to your younger brother, to your older brother, to your siblings. Gone are those days. I'm not advocating for pampering, over pampering the child, but I'm saying that you should speak with them honestly, putting yourself in their shoes, and see what a lot of distraction out there for the kids these days. During your time and my time in school, there were no devices, maybe televisions, not 24 hours, and then you have limited time. There are a lot of distraction they are going through. I mean, these kids have wider opportunity. Education is not just about being in the classroom or going to school. What are other areas of life that you can help your child develop and get better at it? Permit me to say, Two-Face Idibia was a dropout from Unijos, but today he's a star. His music has been studied in school. I mean, so you don't know what future holds for this child. So this issue of hitting and then comparing the child to his mate or his siblings it's unfortunate. Once again, let me go back to Timileyin. We don't know what happened in the family. We don't know what the parents said. I'm not saying they said anything, but we don't know what has happened to her. What could lead to this type of decision? From some other spaces, it was 190 she got. 190 in some school. In fact, a report said that 30 minutes after she took her life, an admission letter was sent via email to her. And then who will attend the school? So parents need to be extra careful. Uncles, aunties around, teachers, handlers of these younger ones need to be careful with their words around these children, because positivity is very important.
Thank you very much.
That's a good
Sam?
place to leave it.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to leave it. But just before we go, I know you have something called GYST. Do you want to talk about that briefly? Because I know you've also been passionate about getting young people and girls into science and technology.
Oh, yes. That's one of the solutions that our organization, the Begotten Educational Foundation, is putting forward to avoid issues like this, scandals like this, and of course, situation where we use our children, as lab rats, to test policies that we have not trained them for. Today, we are even talking about, Jamb. Sorry to shock the world. The current education minister, they also came up recently and said from 2026 we're going to start using this same CBT for WAEC and NECO. People are aware. Yeah. So again, as an organization, the Begotten Educational Foundation, we have taken it upon ourselves right now to go to schools and provide access to digital education, provide access to technical, education for these children. In the sense that the GYST project, which is GIST, Girls Studying Science and Technology, is basically a project that we are rolling out, in North Central Nigeria this year, to empower girls, empower the girl child to become innovators, for them to lead in the field of engineering. And this we are doing with our able partners, also in the government. We give them kudos for that, and we are also encouraging other non-profits to come up to assist the government in some of these things, you know, and also for the government to see that what we are doing as non-profit organization is also to assist and complement their own effort as well. Permit me to just also say one or two concerning what can be done, you know, in this current issue that we have right now, the Jamb issues. First of all, let me say that if you listen to the statements that the professor of Jamb put out, they were aware while the exam was going on that there were glitches, but they never stopped it. We had an issue, incidences in this country where an election was already ongoing, and they found out that there were glitches. They had the character enough to stop that election and postpone it. But these people did not have that moral, that character to say, no, let's stop these things. In fact, they went ahead to release the results and called it a mass failure when they knew initially that the fault came from them. Again, in their report, this is not me fabricating things. Listen, go back and play the statement, the press statement that they gave. It was out of the outcry of Nigerians that made them come so fast to give that review. That they usually do reviews after each exams, but sometimes they do the reviews like months after when nothing can be done. It was because of the outcry of people. Again, death cases have already, you know, been announced. They came up and, of course, did what they did. There needs to be total reform of Jamb. First and foremost, what I'm putting forward is let the infrastructure be fixed. Jamb is one organization that I learned they give back government money in a year. When they have a lot of CPT centers to set up, they have lack of computers. They have lack of CPT centers. And again, Jamb need to ensure that it enforces their results to be valid for more than 1 year. How can I write Jamb and just 1 year, I need to come back again the next year to write Jamb? The Jamb results should be valid for at least 5 years. You can write it and use it again to apply for admission, and this is because we now have fewer institutions and we have more population of Nigerian students who want to go into those institutions. Look at the economic hardship. So where will these people now have money to re-enroll again and again and again and again? So that's number one. Secondly, I also think that Jamb should enforce universities to admit more than once in a year. So if the result, the same way it's done in Canada, you know, there is January batch, there is summer, there is no, you know. So universities can take in students, you know, for more than once in a year. In that way, the pressure will now be on the central education, the government, to increase the tertiary infrastructure, the tertiary education infrastructure in our universities, in our polytechnics, and our colleges of education.
To leave it, gentlemen, thank you so much for your contribution. And our hearts goes to the family of Timothy and every other family who have cases unreported where kids have resulted into self-harm as a result of this scandal. We do urge the federal government, the Joint Admission Matriculation Board, and the Minister of Education to take actual action to ensure that this doesn't repeat itself, and there should be some form of compensation to the families and the people who wrote these exams. That's all we can take on the lifestyle segment. We'll take a quick break. When we return, more on the Weekend Show.